Next on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, we talk to Mike and Lijia Deaton, and they are land flippers, but actually they're not. What they really are is professional business operators, and the lessons that they can share with you can be applied to any and every asset class in real estate investing and in life itself. Please join me as we talk to Mike and Lijia, and they share their wins and they're honest about their losses and how you can take their experience and make your business even better. Please join us on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, where we always talk about the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing.
Welcome to the Real Estate Pessimist podcast, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the truth about real estate investing. I'm Christy Candle, your co-host, and I'm a real estate developer, investor, and I teach locals how to become developers in their own backyard. And I'm joined with my co-host, Eric Stenbakken today.
Hey, good morning, Christy. Yeah, I'm a real estate investor also, long-term and a specialist in short-term, and for many, many years, a secret agent. Yeah, I'm a real estate broker associate, but nobody knew that. So I was out this morning just literally taking pictures of a listing that's going to go live today. And the neighbor came up and says, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm taking pictures for a listing. And he said, "Oh, I thought you had a squirrel in your hands." Because unlike, the old film cameras, you can have the little screen on the back of the camera and you can hold it at a super low angle, right? So I'm holding it down to get the lawn in the foreground and then holding it up. And he's like, "I thought you were trying to release a squirrel." I'm like, "No, I'm trying to sell a house," which sometimes is just as wild. But that's what I was doing this morning.
Amazing.
But we are joined today by Mike and Lijia Deaton, and they've got a cool story here. They've got a lot of stuff going on, and they're going to talk to us a little bit about land flipping. Probably not what you think. Maybe it is. I don't know. Tell us who you are. I want to hear about the fireplace this morning. We were talking before this thing started. We're recording this in July, and they said they had their fireplace going this morning. What's up with?
Well, it's all part of our story and our journey. I grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth. Ligia grew up a little farther to the east. I'll let you dig into that a bit. When we transitioned in 2017 into real estate, we moved to Colorado, and through a couple of moves, we found our way into the mountains of Colorado. So we live about 10,000 feet elevation up in the mountains, and it's true mountain weather. I mean, every day we experience a few seasons. And yeah, the last day of July here, last night, it was nice and chilly, and we had a little rainstorm come through, and it was, down cool in the house. So we just turned on the fire for a little bit and enjoyed a nice evening there. But I mean, Colorado's true. We do have some blue sky, beautiful days, probably 80-90% of the time. Even that morning we had really blue skies. But yeah, it gets chilly. I mean, it's chilly this morning in the house. We're inside temperatures in the 50s. So it's beautiful. I mean, it makes for great sleep, much better sleep than when we were in Dallas with the air conditioner running all night, every night.
I'm sure your friends in Texas will have to sleep in the refrigerator if they're going to get those kind of temperatures.
Yeah.
So I understand. So we've got some stuff on you, Mike. You're headed towards a Leadville 100, which someone may think that that's some sort of fuel grade. You go to the pump and you choose Leadville 100. I know what this is. Not about to do it, but what is the Leadville 100 and why are you doing it?
Well, the first part's easy. The second part's a little harder. So Leadville is, I believe, the highest town in the contiguous, in the lower 48. So it sits at like 10,200 feet elevation or so, the town itself. And it's an old mining town, and they almost really just went into a ghost town decades ago when their mining operations folded up and left. And so they reinvented the town around a series of endurance races. And the races are all through the mountains in and around Leadville. And the iconic race is the Leadville 100 Trail Ultra Marathon. And so it's a foot race, or, it's not really a race. I guess it is for some people. It's not going to be for me, but, it's billed as one of the toughest 100-mile races in the world. But it starts out at, over 10,000 feet, and then it hits a couple of passes up over 13,000 feet, I believe. Yeah. And so, why I'm doing it, I don't know. I honestly, so a lot of people that do these races say you need to have a really compelling why, because when you're out there, you're going to ask that question, why am I out here doing this? And I just, it's called to me for many years. I'm sure part of it's ego. Can I do it? I want to say I've done it. Part of it's just internal. Can I do it? How far can I push myself? I did a 50 miler in Leadville a few weeks back. I actually signed up for a series of endurance races over the summer, and it's kind of a side door to get into the Leadville 100 because it's a lottery system. But if you go in this way, you get not necessarily a guaranteed entry. You have to start every race to get to the last race, which is the 100. And so I signed up just this way, and I don't know, it's too much time on my hands, kind of a thing or something. Yeah, I'm nervous as hell. Like I've never done 100. I've done a couple 50s. You run overnight. It's a 30-hour time limit. So you start at 4 a.m. You have until 10 a.m. the next day to finish. And so almost everybody except for the top 5 or 10 or something is going to be running at night at some point. And a lot of firsts for me. So it's, they say do hard things. I do like to do some hard things, especially physically. I like to challenge myself. I'm getting older, have I still got something in me and all those kind of things. I don't know. I'm working through all of this, but my main thing is I just want to for me, a success will be to get to the starting line and actually go some distance. If I don't hit cut, there's cutoff times along the way that you have to hit. And for me, success is really just lining up and giving it a go.
Ligia, how about you? What are you going to run this, or what's your hard?
I am not.
I'm not. You're going to be cheering him on like, good job, bud.
If you're watching the video, she's shaking her head like this isn't even a close call here.
Not. Few years back, I don't remember what year it was, but I did a 50-mile with Mike in Grand Canyon. And after that, I was like, I've been there, done that, never again. And I enjoy hiking. I kind of enjoy the normal activities. I don't think I like to push myself that hard. Like I like to push myself, but not that hard.
One of the races in the series, so I mentioned here week after next, I'm doing a 100-mile mountain bike ride on Saturday. On Sunday is a 10K run, and Ligia's going to do that one. So she signed up to run the 10K with me. So that'll be our together activity. And quite honestly, that's probably far enough anybody needs to run.
Cool. So, okay, so you're in real estate now, and you've got time on your hands, and enough that you can train for and run a 100-miler at a mere 50 miles in the Grand Canyon. That's a puff thing. Just kidding. I got invited to hike that back and through, and I said, I don't think I'm in shape for that. So much respect to what you all do. How did you land in real estate? Did you just wake up one day in the bassinet and you were flipping houses? I understand that you kind of had some family history in this, but then went the corporate route and maybe made a circle back to that. Tell us a little bit how that story unfolded.
Yeah. So my family, I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, and my mom was a school teacher. She went, into teaching, and my dad was really pretty entrepreneurial. They both went to Texas Christian University there in Fort Worth, and we kind of grew up around that area. And my dad was pretty entrepreneurial. He had like a photography business for a while where he was in shopping malls, and you could stop in and get, a portrait made. He had a little jewelry booth where you custom make jewelry. And then also in parallel, we were kind of the OG house flippers before the TV shows and all of that. So my parents would buy these older homes in the Fort Worth area around TCU, most of this. And I mean, they tell stories. We lived in an awesome house when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old in just an old neighborhood, giant trees. And I think they bought that house for like $3,000 or something. It was like nuts. And we would live in it. They would fix it up, put in new flooring, paint the walls, do things. We'd live for a year or two maybe, and then we'd be on to the next one. And then in the 80s, when Arlington, Texas, which is kind of situated between Dallas and Fort Worth, became a suburban place to move, there was so much development going on. My dad became a general contractor, and he built a lot of spec homes and some custom homes, and he loved it. Like he loved the high-end wood finishings, cabinetry, he loved to tweak designs and do all that stuff. But late 80s, it became really hard. Pulte's and the big box home builders came in. They started building as cheap as you could homes. The margins really thinned out. The banking crisis happened. It became really hard. You couldn't just walk into your local bank and shake somebody's hand and get loans. And so my dad pivoted and got into other things, but the bug never really took for me. I, as you mentioned, went the path of going to university. I got out. I got a job. Most of my career has been in big tech. I was with Motorola in the early days. Motorola was huge. This was back in the old days when paging was kind of the big thing.
So okay, I'm going to stop you right here.
Yeah.
Because I saw this thing on Instagram where somebody yours and my age was asking their teenage daughter, what is a pager? And she's like, someone who writes books? Like, oh, man, I feel so old.
I feel better now because I was just telling someone my very first job, I had a BlackBerry, and they're like, you are old. I'm like, Oh my God.
Yeah.
All right, so
Well,
you're doing tech, and then, well, obviously you're not still in tech.
yeah.
What
So I
happened there?
spent
Were you both in tech? What happened?
I spent 20, 25 years in tech. Part of that career, I was with Nokia mobile phones when Nokia was kind of king of the mobile phone business, right before iPhone shifted the landscape. But so when Nokia was growing really big, we were building factories. We were very vertically integrated in terms of manufacturing. And I got an opportunity to move to Romania and start a factory there. That was in 2006 timeframe. And I took it. So I took an expat contract, moved over to Romania. And Ligia was also working for Nokia at the time and more in the software side of the business, which there was a small office, I guess, there in Romania. And I guess you got asked to come over to the mobile phone division. And that's where we met. Literally, I was going through a divorce at the time and I was thinking, great, I'm going to reinvent. I'm going to go over. I'm going to be a bachelor. I'm going to just enjoy, all this life. Literally the second visit to Romania, my first visit was just do you think you could live here? It was May. It was beautiful flowers. It was this old world town that I visited. And I was like, hell yes, I can move here. And so the second visit I made was actually to the office, and Ligia and I just each saw each other early. I was in early and Ligia came in early and just sparks right away. I was like, okay, this is not how I drew it up, but we had this kind of secret courtship for a little while. And then, yeah, we met, fell in love and stayed there for about 3 years. We were married in Romania. And then we moved back in 2010 to the US. And we were a few more years both in W-2 jobs, and in 2016 we both got laid off. So we for separate reasons. Ligia was in healthcare. Their office was moving back to Arkansas. I was with Microsoft at the time, who had bought Nokia as part of an acquisition, and they didn't really have a footprint in Dallas-Fort Worth too much, and I didn't want to move to Washington, and so I took a severance. And it was in that moment that a lot of things lined up. I mean, I have two older daughters that from a previous marriage that were going off to college. We both were out of work, just did some soul searching. And real estate was the path that we pivoted into out of that versus just getting back into the W-2 grind, because I was traveling about 50% of the month. I had an international team. Any company that I was going to get hired by was like Tesla or Apple or Amazon. And they also weren't, in locations that we wanted to move to. And just the whole thought of getting back into a job, new company culture. What was the workplace going to be like? Okay, maybe I was starting at a kind of a high level job, but you're starting over. You have no, just all of that was just not what we wanted out of our lives. We did a lot of exercises to check in with our values, what we wanted, and things like that led us into something different. And for us, that was real estate and land.
So this is a great place to stop and reflect on a core concept. A lot of people look at real estate investing, whatever asset class it is, or entrepreneurship in general, back out of that, and say that's so risky. It's so scary. And it is. Somebody asked me, I said, well, how was it like being a commercial photographer? And I said, well, the idea of being unemployed didn't really scare me because after every job, I was unemployed, right? This just happens. But a lot of people will look at the fear of starting something like this and say, well, I'd rather have something safe, like a W-2, because that's guaranteed. But what you just heard from you, not so much. Ligia, I want to hear from you a little bit about the concept and how you shifted from the safety of a W-2, the regularity of that, to being okay embracing maybe a little bit of the unknown. Mikey shared that he saw some of this happen in his life earlier. He was like, okay, I've seen it happen. How did you come to this? And how, for both of you, how did you evaluate that risk versus safety versus let's go for it?
Well, that's a great question, because when I grew up under communism, I was 14 when revolution happened. So for me, safety was not a concept. Like we grew up and we lived paycheck to paycheck. So I have higher tolerance for risk than Mike. And I think for me, when I got laid off, it was very clear that a job, job security was an illusion. It was extremely clear. So when Mike and I kind of talked about it, and we stumbled into this business opportunity to do land flipping, I was like, yeah, let's go for it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? And Mike can get into it a little more about the model, but for me, it was like, okay, even if we end up with a piece of property and let's say the worst thing, what's the worst thing that can happen? So we wanted to kind of look into the eye of what's the worst thing that can happen for us? It's like we buy an RV and we live on the property for a while until we get back into RV. But I have a higher tolerance for risk than Mike because of the way I grew up.
Yeah, it's an interesting parallel in our story for exactly that reason. I am deeply rooted in this W-2 safety, paycheck, benefits, or at least I was, back in those days, and that's how I viewed the world, and partially that was circumstantial. I had in university, I was pre-med track, and I was thinking I'm going to go be a doctor, get a high salary, and then kind of pivoted out of that about halfway through college. For most people, I see it happening in our daughters as well. You get to that stage of 18, early 20s, and you start, at least here in the US, you just start to accumulate things. You get a car, and then maybe you get a pet, and then you get a relationship, and then, in my case, it was marriage, and then kids, and then a mortgage, and you're trapped in this. And I had no wiggle room. I mean, we had all this debt and a lot of consumer debt on top of that, credit cards and such. And for me, and this was also at a time where, like today, thinking about entrepreneurship and doing gig economy and all that kind of stuff, it's really nimble and there's so much opportunity. Back then, it was a lot less. I mean, if you thought about doing a side hustle, it was almost like a brick and mortar, or, there just wasn't, I mean, the internet was there, but it wasn't as much as it is today.
Hey, can we talk business for a second? If you've been flipping houses or running short-term rentals, you already know how to hustle. You know how to spot opportunity, add value, and make a property work harder. But if we're being honest, flipping gets exhausting, and short-term rentals are definitely not passive. So what's next? For a lot of people I work with, the answer is real estate development. I'm talking about turning a vacant lot into a quadplex, or bringing a rundown building back to life as a mixed-use space. I'm Christy Candle, and I've been a real estate developer my entire career. And now I host the Local Real Estate Developer podcast to help locals like you do the same. We pull back the curtain and show you what it takes to go from flipper or host to local developer. If you're ready to build something bigger, this podcast is for you. Check out the Local Real Estate Developer podcast on all platforms.
And so there was a lot of factors that kept me in this W-2 environment. And then you just see, okay, well, I'll just keep getting promotions, or I'll pivot over here and just kind of keep bumping up my salary a little bit. And the 401k is working in the background and all of that. But in that moment, yeah, Ligia was our biggest cheerleader in, hey, let's do it. And fortunately for us, we had money in the bank. So we had a cushion and a runway, or at least fortunate for me, because for me, that was a safety net. And that's how we went about it. We just said, okay, let's put a seed capital into the business of a certain amount. Let's give ourselves a runway, which for us, we just said, let's give ourselves 12 months to give this a go, see if it can work. And so we put those factors in place that gave a bit of a sense of security. I think it's Tim Ferriss who has the fear setting exercise. Ligia kind of referred to that. Like we went through that, and that was like, okay, we live on one of our properties or something. We both have family we could live with. I mean, the worst case scenario for us was not really all that threatening if it were to go that way. And so, yeah.
Case scenario was going back to do something that everyone else does.
Honestly,
literally the worst case scenario is getting those golden handcuffs again.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Or you get freedom.
Yeah. And
so from experience.
So what happened? I mean, one of the intriguing things, and we haven't had a land flipper on our show before, is tell us really quickly, what is it and what is it not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So land flipping, it's an active business of buying and selling land, just vacant land. There's no value add. There's no remodels. There's no entitlements, horizontal development or vertical development. It's quite simply buying land at a under market value price. So if a piece of property is $50,000, you want to buy it for less than $50,000. And then you turn around and resell it. And for maybe a year or two before the layoff happened, we had both revisited Rich Dad, Poor Dad and kind of reawakened this thought of we should really work on, maybe it wasn't a complete pivot, but at least working on alternative income streams, looking at things like that. And so I'd been digesting podcasts. Back then I was also running quite a bit, and I would listen to different podcasts. I think at the time, like Pat Flynn had a growing podcast about, smart passive income.
Right. I'm a member of that community, and Pat Flynn, and
great stuff, right? I mean, he's still going strong. He was very inspirational at the time as somebody who could make a living doing something not a corporate career or things. There's maybe one or two others, but I had heard on two different podcasts, different people that were doing land flipping, and it just sounded really appealing. It was a low cost of entry. You can buy properties for thousands of dollars, $1,000 even. And they were making triple digit returns. They were 2x to 4x per deal that they were doing. And so it sparked a curiosity to at least explore it. I bought a toolkit, which was it came in a paper binder with DVDs that you could watch. And I actually had a computer that had a DVD slot on it that you could put the things in, just more dating of myself.
That's not that long ago, just to be clear.
It's not. I was about to say 10 years ago. It's not that long ago.
It's not.
I know, but
it's so archaic to think about these days. Like, oh, wow.
So you're feeding yourself here. You're actively saying, okay, I want to learn. I want to try something new. I want to develop this maybe on the side. Maybe you're not ready just to jump in and abandon everything else, but you're thinking, I need to get something going on the side. Same thing happened to me. We played Kiyosaki's game Cash Flow.
I love it. Yeah.
I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad years and years ago. I didn't come away with the real estate idea, but I came away with the idea of if there's a boss and an employee, how come I'm not the boss? Mm-hmm. Because I had just been raised to think it's like, well, you just go and get a good job. And I read that book and I thought, how come I'm not the one offering a good job to someone else? And I thought, okay, I got to do that. But I played the game and I realized, wow, two things. One, if this is really how the economy works, and it is, then I'm doing it wrong. Because my wife and she's a professional in medicine, and I was doing commercial photography, but it's both gig. It was essentially you eat what you kill, right? Yeah. If you don't go, I was shocked. I was talking to my sister-in-law actually a couple of weeks ago, and I said something about vacation time. And I said, you realize that in our world, there's no PTO. They were talking about PTO, paid time off. And I'm like, paid time off. Neither one of us have ever had paid time off, ever. If you get off the mill, you quit making money. It's that straightforward. And so that we got to do something else. So it sounds like you got a dimension of that. And you're like, okay, got to do something else. So you start seeding podcasts. You bought a kit. So did you do it? What happened?
Yeah. And so the kit came. And as a lot of us do, I probably looked at a chapter and then it quickly found the way to the back of the desk. And my personality, I'm kind of an all-in guy. And so I was all in with Microsoft. I was giving them everything I had. It was traveling. It was time in the office. It was nights on email. I didn't carve out room. I felt guilty, honestly, if I was carving out time to do something on my own. I felt like, gosh, I'm a bad employee. I'm not, doing everything there for Microsoft. And so it was in that moment where we both got laid off that we said, okay, hey, we have this idea. Why don't we give it a shot and just actually go through it and do it? And so we took some time, it wasn't too long, but we checked in we did some values exercises, like what are our core values? We looked at future casting. What's our perfect day look like? What do we want at the end of our lives to look back on and be, proud and rewarded? And it wasn't the career. It wasn't all that stuff, right? As most people will figure out, it was time together. It was having experiences and adventure travel and doing things like that. And so we just said, hey, let's see if we can make this happen. And we just plunged in. So we went to like a weekend boot camp where we could learn more about the business. We surrounded ourselves with other people that were doing it. We heard success stories. We saw that people were doing it. And much like you, Eric, we were like, okay, if other people are doing it, why can't we do it? And so we just plunged in. We got a coach and a mentor. Like I said, we seeded our business with some capital. We set ourselves a time runway and we went in full time. We were both not working. And so we structured, my background is operations and supply chain. And so we just structured it very much like a business. We set up time blocks, we put KPIs down, all those kind of good things. And we stepped through setting up a business.
So how far into that runway when you were going, because you gave yourself 12 months, how long did it take to get that first deal? And did you just do one or how many months?
It took 6 months to go complete cycle. Like we were purchasing properties in that first 6 months. We got a lot of inventory, but it took us 6 months to have that first sale, which is a magical sale. Yeah, Eric, you were asking earlier what's not, what this business model is not. And one of the things that I can say is that it's not a get rich quick. We could have had sales before the 6 months. I don't know why it took us only 6 months. Other people had successes before.
We're comparing ourselves to they're selling.
But the The reality is that it's not a get rich quick. It can happen, but it's like a steady business that you have to start and maintain and run with it. And it takes grit, it takes discipline, it takes consistency, it takes that mindset of I'm not going to give up because I don't have success right away and all that stuff.
So
It's
at month 6 or at month, was it that first sale that you said, okay, this is viable, we could go? Or was it, okay, that proved the concept. We can not only buy and now own all this land, but now we can make money at it. Was that your like, okay, this is it, like we truly can go all in? Or did it take a couple more sales to get to that point?
For me, that was that first sale. We saw the concept of, oh, this is working. We had that proof of concept. And for me, that was it.
Yeah. Likewise, we were struggling mentally at that. It was kind of there was a term, the messy middle and whatever you want to call it. But like Ligia said, we had worked the front end of the process. We put some offers out. We had interest. We were able to see that people were willing to sell their properties at a decent discount below market value. That was working. We just couldn't crack that marketing and sales piece. And we leaned on a community. Our coaches helped us out. But that was more, I would say, on the operational pieces of things. Where we weren't getting good support was, entrepreneurship is whatever percent you want to put on it, but it's heavily weighted in the mindset side of the game. A lot of things come up, right? I mean, especially we were first time entrepreneurs. And so the doubts were there. And Ligia and I both love personal development. And so we were able to lean on each other and help each other through this time. But yeah, once we kind of got that sale, then we were like, okay, now we've got it. We can repeat it. And things did unlock right after that. Like, I mean, it felt like really things, whatever that was that was kind of holding us back. Neither of us worked in sales. And part of the business is, people reach out, hey, I'm interested in this property. And we're not pushy salespeople by any means, but, I'm sure people could feel and read the maybe hesitation or whatever. But, once that cracked, then yeah, things unlocked a little bit. We had our goals set. I mean, that first year, we were using our own business. Land is a great business to use leverage because the margins are so thick and fat. Like you can give up 10 or 15 points to a lender and it really doesn't make a whole lot of impact in the profitability of a deal, especially if your deal sizes are a little bit larger. But we were using our own money. And so, step one for us was just to get back to zero, stop taking out of savings to live every month and kind of get to that point. And then it was growth after that. And so, yeah, it didn't happen immediately. I would say in that first year, we definitely got back to zero. Part of our strategy is owner financing properties. So when somebody buys from us, we will act as the bank and we'll put a promissory note and we'll say like, if you want to pay us $500 a month for 4 or 5 years, that stacks up a monthly recurring income. You can call it passive income. There's obviously work on the front end, but that becomes our monthly income. And that's just our model. And that takes time, right? I mean, even if you're selling at $500 a month, it takes time to stack it up to 6 and 8 and 10K a month. And you're also outlaying cash at the front end of that if you're financing your own properties. And so, that was some of the things that we had to balance and work out. And in between there, you can do some cash deals, which are great. They infuse money immediately. You get 20K, 40K pops. But, those, at least for my peace of mind, it's better to have I know for 5 years today, if we stop working, I know for 4 or 5 years, we've got a decent chunk of income coming in that more than pays for our living expenses and fuels our lifestyle and things like that. But yeah, that first year was definitely a journey, but it was a good one.
Okay. So this is awesome. And I want to say to those listening, maybe go back and listen to that again, what they said about how they transitioned from the W-2 to this, because it was methodical. A lot of people think it's just like jump out of the airplane and build a parachute on the way down, kind of, because that's how you overcome fear.
Some people can do it.
Yeah, but most don't. And the problem is that we have survivor bias, and those who hit the ground never make it on podcasts, right? And so the fact is that you were gradual and methodical, and you did the things. You learned from mentors, you bought materials, you went with community, you supported each other as spouses, you took the risks. All of these things are Those are not details. That is foundational. That's the bones of the business and how you did this. And you've mentioned the word business over and over again. A lot of people will think that real estate investing or flipping land is speculation. It's gambling. But you've used the word business and systems many, many times here. And I don't want that to go unnoticed. It's my understanding that this worked so well that you started looking into some other asset classes because real estate does offer tax advantages. And there's a reason, because there's the cash flow game, there's recurring income game. Then there's cash flow. Then there's the tax savings game. Tell us kind of your transition, or not transition, but addition of some new asset classes and some of the ups and downs. I mean, this is the Real Estate Pessimist podcast here.
Yeah. And so you bring up a good point there. More than any other asset class, I would say land flipping, the way we do it, is the least speculative of any of them because there's just fewer variables. We're just simply buying property below market value and reselling it. And so the risk there is that maybe you don't do your comp evaluation correctly and you buy in at the wrong price. The other risks with land would be just that there's something off with the property. Either there's a tax lien or some kind of a lien that you didn't catch in due diligence.
Underground storage tanks. You're like,
there
whoa.
Could be, there could be physical things that you didn't catch. Those are few and far between, really. So there's a little bit of risk. As you get more complex, then obviously the risk and the time stretches out, which adds to the risk of a market moving and those kind of things. But yeah, as you mentioned, so that first year was our proof of concept year. We kind of got to a level where we said, okay, we can do this. We can pay our bills. We can still fund the business. In that moment, we also took the act so we sold our house in Dallas and we moved to Colorado. We started renting. We were like, okay, let's just rent for a little bit. A part of that was we wanted to scope out where in Colorado we wanted to live. We knew we really wanted to be around mountains and trails and nature. But we took the conscious decision to downsize, to really minimize our expenses while we were growing this business. And so, for us, it took a couple years and we had gotten back to our W-2 salary levels. We were making good money. And most of that we were feeding back into the business because it's just such a great return on the money that goes back in. But very soon we had a tax problem. Like, one of the downside of land flipping is it's a capital gains business because you're short-term flipping properties. And so you're paying a top tax bracket. And yeah, that was a shocker. It was like, whoa, now we have a huge tax bill. And so we started looking at how do we minimize this? We've talked about, Kiyosaki's environment. Well, Tom Wheelwright is a CPA, his CPA, but he has his own ecosystem of great. I mean, if anybody hasn't heard of, he has some great books, some podcasts. He talks a lot about how to minimize your tax bill, regardless if you're an entrepreneur or in business or different things. And so I read his book. I can't remember the title offhand right now, but it talked about commercial investing, different ways to get into things. And so we said, let's diversify into some commercial assets. We took a little bit of time trying to figure out how we wanted to get started. I talked to a lot of people that are also in the same, like, which asset do I get into? Short-term rentals? Do I multifamily syndications, oil and gas? How do we get into real estate? And, there's no easy answer.
I am co-host of this podcast because education is my calling. That's also why I developed a course on short-term rentals. It's called STR in an Hour, and it's perfect for busy professionals. It's a lot of content packed into 1 hour. No fluff, no upsell. It's an overview of STRs from A to Z. Everything from how to choose a property to how to estimate income and expenses. It's literally the best and most content I could pack into 59 minutes. With over 4,000 nightly stays in my own STRs, I've learned important lessons, and I want to share them with you. Link with more information in the show notes.
You can look at a few variables like, okay, how much money do you have or not have? What size of investment are you able to make? Different things. But ultimately, we just picked multifamily. We just said, okay, it's an essential need for people, housing. You feel good doing it. We knew of a few things. And so we decided to get into multifamily investing. And we went down the same path. We said, okay, let's find a mentor. Let's find a community. Let's learn. Let's spend 6 months learning the language, things about it before we take a plunge. We started as passive investors in a few deals, and then we got in more actively. We raised some capital. We ultimately worked our way through finding our own deal and being more in a lead position. So we were methodical in how we stepped into multifamily. I would say for us, on the unfortunate side of things, we kind of got in, I don't know if it's 2020 or 2021, but we got in at I would call it a bubble almost. Multifamily syndications deals were going everywhere. I mean, they were just
everybody had one.
turning. We started out, our early deals were home runs, right? We had double your money in 12 months or 24 months, got our money back. Okay, let's redeploy it. But then, when COVID happened, a lot of crazy things started happening. I mean, the world shut down. A lot of the deals we were doing were value add deals. And so you had contractors that weren't able to do work. You had materials that weren't able to come to be used, or they took a long time. And any delay in these value add properties, that's money that you're losing, especially if you've shut down a unit or a building and your rent's not coming in. And so, some of our later deals just got into big trouble. And I would say mistakenly, and I don't know if this was through any intention, but there was this communication out there in the world of multifamily that it's a physical asset. You're not going to lose your money because, okay, at the end of the day, you have a building, and that's just not the case, right? I mean, the bank ultimately owns these properties, and if you're not paying, then there's the worst case is a foreclosure, and everybody loses. And so there is a risk, a very real risk that could happen. And we unfortunately got into a couple of our deals that we were in did get foreclosed on, and we and some investors lost money. We had some others that just squeaked out. We were able to resell to get people their capital back plus a little bit, and it was a rocky road in multifamily, much in contrast to our experience in land. And so we can go into any or all of that, but it was that was our pivot, was really more out of tax efficiency, which we did get a lot of tax efficiency out of. Some not paper losses, some actual losses.
That's the worst kind. Okay, so you're going through this. We'll get to the technical tips that you've got a little bit later. Here in a second. But mentally, okay, this is the Real Estate Pessimist podcast. It's not because we're pessimists. It's because we know that there is a downside and it can get hard. And you can do all the right things and still get a bad outcome. And that makes us question, like, man, was I crazy? Did I do it wrong? What happened? But there are things that happen that just, you could have done all the right things and get a bad outcome. How did you keep your mindset healthy during this time? Ligia, I want to hear from you also, because it sounds like you've kind of had this steel mindset, like, we're just going to get through one way or another. We're going to do this. How did you get through this? Because this isn't fun right now, right? We've gone from, this is good times, we've got a problem, we need to shelter some money for taxes. But now all of a sudden it's like, wow, probably not only were taxes due from last year when it was good, but you've got bills to pay this year of losses. And you're like, oh man, how did you keep your mindset focused? I'm just going to leave it right there. How did you do that? What did you do?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I'm still working on it. So for me, I mean, the reality is, like, I don't have any other choice. I want to move forward. I want to be successful. I don't want this to break me. So I have moments when I'm licking my wounds, But anyway, that's it. Like, for me, it's like, we have to move forward. So a lot of meditation practices, a lot of work with my mind. It's like, whenever those thoughts come back, it's like, okay, I want to learn from it, draw the line, but move forward and keep my mind healthy. And I rely on Mike a lot. I ask him, how do you do this? Because I have a harder time than him. And
did you find that you were attaching some of your self-worth to the outcomes and
Yes.
some, like,
Yes.
yeah.
I think many times I would have rather paid that money to the taxman than going through this mental turmoil. But I realized that I've learned a lot through it. And I just have to reframe it in such a way that this was a learning experience and it has enriched my life in ways that I may not see them right now.
Mm-hmm.
But moving forward, it's the game for me. Like, I have no other choice but be healthy and move forward.
Yeah, it's challenging. Ligia said the word learning a few times. That's one of my top core values. And I've really evolved that over this last 9-year journey, reframing so I grew up, I've talked a bit about it, but like I'm a first child, I'm an achiever. My parents, my mom's a teacher. And so it was always grades, grades, grades. I graduated top of my class. And so for me, failure was always very prominent in my worldview. It was a very real thing. It was like you either get straight A's or you failed. You do this or you failed. And so I've worked really hard through my personal development journey to reframe failure as learning and taking lessons away from life. And so that's a heavy player in this multifamily part of our journey. We had some wins. We had some early wins. We learned a lot. I think for us, if it had just been us, and this is why we really lean and love land so much. It is just us. We're taking decisions. It works. It doesn't work. It only impacts us. But in a syndication, you have 25, 50 investors, and it's not just us. And so that's what hurts the most, I would say, is, you are part of a team that said, hey, we've got a business plan. We're going to do this. Here's the results we're forecasting. And it doesn't happen. And that's painful. And it should be painful if you're stewarding other people's investments and money. I know some people that are a little colder about it, and I guess if you do, as with anything, if you're doing 1,000 deals and a few of them don't work out or whatever, then it's just business. That's been the painful part, but it's really, I think I try to look at it more as a learning experience. We did learn a lot. We can get into the lessons learned for sure. There's several.
Yeah, let's go.
It's been tricky. Yeah. Okay. So, in that lane, and I'm going to say this first one, and as with most things, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. But like, these syndications specifically, as with any business, we can go to Warren Buffett here, right? He values businesses, and when he invests and or now buys a business, he'll come in and a lot of times put his own management team in place, right? He picks the people and says, or his team does, and they say, we want to restructure in this way. Well, syndications they're a business. You're putting a business plan together. We're going to buy this property. We're going to make these changes. We're going to be able to implement forced appreciation by doing this. And in 3 or 5 or 6 years, the business is going to be worth Y. Well, that's all great on paper, but somebody has to execute that business plan. And who does that is people. And so any syndication is run by a person or a team of people. And it's easy to look at the business case and say, wow, this is a great investment, but you really need to look at who's going to be doing the implementation of that. Do they have experience? And why I say it's easy to say, hard to do, until you've worked with people, you don't know how they're going to react. And so when we went through this turmoil, we saw true colors come out. You see people that just disappear. It's like, hello, how can you just not respond to emails? You see people who want to hide things. You see people who are very transparent, and so you see this full range but it's really hard to tease that out in a lot of cases before you enter into business with somebody. It may even be impossible until you've been through, if you watch these competitive game shows on TV, they put people in stressful situations to elicit this exact behavior. Like, okay, who's going to crumble under stress? Who's going to rise to the occasion? And so the biggest thing for anybody investing or partnering is really just do as much as you can to vet this out. And, I don't know how to do that other than ask people who've done deals with them, but you can't cherry pick those people. If you ask the person, they're going to give you, talk to this person. They have a great opinion of me. And so it's kind of hard, but it should be hard. If you're making $100,000 investment in a deal, or you're putting 6 figures in, you probably should take some time and not just jump into something. So that I would say for both of us, that's been our biggest takeaway, is just really take your time in going through and partnering. I don't know if we would have done anything different. We went through a pretty robust process of evaluating different multifamily syndicators. We found one. We talked to people. They spoke highly. In the period of time that we interviewed people, the market had been super healthy and deals were going. And so it was hard to even find anybody that had a bad thing to say, because in that period of time, you could almost absentee sign up for a deal and have it be successful because the market was just appreciating. And so people were selling deals every 12, 24, 36 months. And so that's kind of been the biggest takeaway. But there were other technical mistakes. in that period of time, there was a lot of floating rate debt loans that were being taken. So, I mean, the market was at an all-time low for interest rates almost. And so, if you look back and you think, why were we taking floating rate debt when the only way the interest rates could go was up? And, we were getting cap rates and things like that. But that's where we were relying on our mentors and people in the business to have that expertise. And there were just some fundamental mistakes that caught deals. And, we can argue, was it irresponsible? Was it just, there was almost an irrational exuberance in the market of just, let's close this deal, let's close that deal, let's get this next deal.
And that was across the market. And,
Yes,
so
every
it's
asset
so
class.
easy to go backwards and look and
Yeah,
hindsight
that's why
is
I don't-
2020.
Right.
And you see all the things like, oh yeah, if I could have seen that, and, gone through my shares of up and downs as well, and really just agreed on the mindset where you have to you get to a point where you're able to detach yourself from the outcome that happened. And it's like, my self-worth is not based on this. What did I learn from this? And I mean, we say it in sports all the time, like, you learn more from a loss than a win.
Totally.
And like, even though we keep joking about, oh, we're old and aging ourselves, we're also very young in this game. And what we would do next and what we're building next is going to be so much better and have an even better solid foundation to go make that impact. And like, you guys are giving back, and we'll talk about this later, but like, the mentoring that you're doing now is what you didn't get before. And so how many more people are you going to help avoid those mistakes because you went through that fire yourself?
Yeah, as we transition into that, because that's where we'll go next. I think it's really important, and something really struck me in what you were saying, Mike, is that when it comes to syndications or business structures like that, we think of it's a real estate purchase. I'm purchasing a building that has 60 units. Yes, but what you're really betting on, what you're actually investing in, is the human team that operates that. Because that building by itself isn't going to do anything. You need people to maintain it. You need people to fill it. You need people to, all the things having to do with the managing of that. So what you're really doing is you're not investing in an apartment complex. You're investing in a management team. And that is I think, a mistake that a lot of people, yes, it's a management team. You're buying the asset, but that asset is not worth anything unless you have the management team to run it properly. And that's where it fails or succeeds, in addition to some of these other things with, floating debt rate, or if you buy a complex in a community and one of the major employers leaves, hey, you could have an awesome management team and you could have a great debt rate and you're still in trouble. And it's a real thing. So I watched a bunch of your YouTube videos on land flipping and kind of explaining because I was new enough to, it's like, what is this? Who are we going to interview? And what is this even about? And so I watched some of your YouTube videos explaining them, and I appreciate that very much. For our listeners, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now to help other people understand this, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's like, wait a minute, what is this and how does this work? It sounds really pretty cool, but it also sounds like, and I don't want to, correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like this is a business, and it sounds like this is a business that is actually organized a lot around operations. You have a system. You work the system. You're not just rolling the dice and hoping you get lucky. So how do you run your coaching business, and what does that do for people?
Yeah, thanks. Great questions. And it is, a lot of people will say land investing, and it's not investing. It's a business. You're actively running a business the way we run it. You can invest in land. You can buy and hold for appreciation. There are people that do projects where you can invest in the land and do things. But this is a business. Once we had a lot of success with our business, we had some friends and family and people that we'd meet that would ask us, how do I get started? Can you help us get started? Do these kind of things. And so about 2 years ago, we consciously sat down and said, there are other programs out there. What would we offer that would be different? And that obviously comes from our own journey and our own experience. And so when we decided, let's go ahead and do this, what we thought we would bring to the table is one, mindset, because that was our struggle. We had a great coach that could teach us the very technical, clinical pieces, but we got no mindset help. And so we fortunately were able to lean on each other, like I mentioned earlier. And so I have a heavy background in personal development and coaching. And so, we try to bring that element into our business as well as more of a softer skill. But as you mentioned, it is very much a business, and a lot of, not just in land, in across the board, a lot of, I'll say the word gurus, but a lot of people who promote courses or programs, they will get out there and, if you think about, if you have 1,000 students that come through your program, just a normal distribution curve, you're going to have 5% that hit home runs and just have success, largely luck driven. And then you're going to have 5 or 10% on the back end tail of the spectrum that don't have success, and you have some in the middle. And so it's easy to get out there and promote your winners, but they don't necessarily maybe do things as a system. Well, land being a business, if you're not careful, I have worked with many people in the land business that need help with their land business because they're not making money. And it's really easy to get out there and sign up for a handful of monthly subscription services, to hire some VAs. Everybody pushes, hey, get a VA for this, get a VA for that. Before you know it, you've spent your margin in the business. And if you don't have a deal come in, or 2 or 3, then you're not making money. And so it's really easy to be unsuccessful if you're just not careful with the money. Land is a great business because the margins can be so big that you can make mistakes and still make money. You just need to be sure that you're methodical. So part of what we do in our clients is make sure they're stepping into it and setting up a very methodical way of going about it to not get out over their skis and get into trouble. And so those are probably the 2 elements where we really, along with the nuts and bolts of running the land business, let's just make sure you're setting up a healthy business. You're not over expensing before you're starting to get some cash flow in. I mentioned earlier, if you want to sell owner financing, you need to either have a healthy debt behind you or make sure you have capital. You also want to make sure, a lot of what we do in our owner financing is we try to get our capital back in 8 to 10 months, which is not terribly difficult to do, but we like to structure our down payment and monthly payments so that money comes back and we're not, there's a cost of capital in any business. And it's easy to buy $1,000 property and sell it for $99 a month, but that's really not responsible at all. You're not going to get your money back ever if you do that. And so really the business fundamentals need to come in, and that's a couple of the areas where we focus on making sure people are successful and setting them up for success versus just saying, land is great, here's how you do it, go do it. I see a lot of that in the marketplace, and not just in land, in other businesses as well.
Absolutely. And
the reality is that you mentioned it earlier, we don't make the same profit on every single deal. Like overall, we make great profit, but it's not on every single deal. Not every single deal is a home run, but it is profitable. And I'll have to repeat again, we've never lost money on a land deal.
Knock on wood. But we've done hundreds of deals, and we've never lost money on a deal. We've never been stuck with a property. And so as long as you're doing the fundamentals properly, you can set yourself up for success. And it's just making sure that you do those fundamentals. And land is a much easier one to do than, say, a multifamily deal where, for all the things we talked about, controllables and uncontrollables, there's maybe 100 or more variables that have to line up. And it's a much simpler business model to be successful on, but it takes work.
Yeah. And I want to point out to some of our listeners who might not have watched the YouTube videos yet, that I have, is that when they're talking about investing, or I should say buying land and running a land business, you guys are doing it much like house flippers do. You market to a lot of people, find possible motivated sellers. You offer them, hey, we can take care of this right now for you. Here you go. And it's not retail. You're not buying at retail and hoping for appreciation to sell this. So your purchase prices, or I should say your percentage of sellers to offers, or to just people you're marketing to, is you're not 50%. You're not, hey, I see that there's a piece of land, value might be $50,000. We'll offer $25,000. Hey, we get 50% of people taking it. It's not that, because I bought land and I lost money on it, but I wasn't buying land as a business to flip that land. I bought that land. It was at full retail. It was in a very high demand area. It was 2006. Okay, fast forward 3 years. What do you think happened to that land value, right? And because what I was doing and it was, we were going to build our forever home on it, and we didn't. We ended up selling that. But my point is that it would be easy to look at this from the outside and say, buying land, making money, it's all the same. It is not all the same. You're running a calculated business. You're doing your math. You're not getting attached like, that's mine, I'll pay whatever it costs to get it. You're not doing that. You've got a number. If that number doesn't work, you say, hey, thank you very much. Maybe next time. Don't lose our number in case you change your mind. And then that's different than going out and buying just a piece of land at full retail off of the MLS and then just hoping that you'll find somebody to pay you 50% more a few months later, because it is a massive difference. I just want to point that out to people that it is a business. They're running this as a business, and penciling all of these things out, it's a thing that you've got to, like any asset class. I do short-term rentals a lot. Christy does development. I just can't buy a corner in any town anywhere and then hope that Walgreens is going to pay me a ton of money to put up their store later. Like, that's just not how that works. Right. That's gambling. That's not even investing. And so it's really important for people to to step back and really look at what all the pieces are. And this is why we started kind of doing it jokingly, but Christy and I always put a disclaimer at the end of the podcast now. And here it comes. This isn't advice. Like, literally, this isn't advice. Advice has a fiduciary element to it. Like, hey, I know your situation. We've talked about it. We've unpacked it. We've looked at the whole scope of things. Here's maybe what you should do, what you shouldn't do. You need advice. This isn't advice, right? He's not telling you just to go out and buy a piece. Hey, I got an empty lot next door. We should buy it. We'll make a bunch of money. That's not what we're saying here.
We're giving you the education so that you can make the best business decision for yourself and say, okay, I have all of this information. I understand. If we've done our job right, you understand what you're looking at, and then you can go decide, do you want to do it or not?
So we're talking about stuff like,
this is the value of good coaching as well. I mean, our success is predicated on being very methodical, and we learned from others. But yes, it is exactly like, in many ways, other real estate asset classes. It starts with market selection. We have methods to go and look at what markets do we consider healthy, what markets would we avoid. But even then, it comes to testing out those markets. And so we'll send out, like you mentioned, we'll send out 1,000 mailers, maybe 5,000 mailers. We'll test a few price points. We only take the ones that we're going to have a margin on. And that percentage varies. Obviously, if we're buying a $5,000 property, we need to buy it for 50 cents or less on the dollar. If we're buying a $500,000 property, well, we can maybe buy that for 90% of value and still make a huge margin on it. But the tolerances tighten up a little bit because now you're depending on reselling. So there's a method going through the process of acquisitions and transactions and then marketing and sales that definitely sets us up for success. Yes, it's not just kind of willy-nilly going out there and making a bunch of offers and buying properties.
And like Mike says, many times we make the money on the buy. Like we say no to many deals because it's not going to be profitable. We don't just buy properties that come on our lap.
And that's hard at first when you're because we were hungry. We emotionally, we wanted a deal. Maybe we should take it or not. Now we're very comfortable. If the deal doesn't work, we know there's hundreds of other deals out there, and we'll say no. And I don't know, 5 times out of 10, those people will come back and they'll say, okay, now we're ready to make a deal. And we'll tell them that. We'll be like, hey, if your situation changes, you know where we are, reach out. We're happy to continue working. And many times people do circle back. It's hard to sell a property. They don't want to engage in realtors, or they think they're going to get more or something. And yes, it is a, when we started this business, I would say a 3 to 5% positive response was a pretty normal response rate, right? We'd send out 100 mailers and you'd get 3 or 5 responses. You send out 1,000, you get 30 or 50 good responses. Things have tightened up a little bit. It's still market to market dependent. Like, there's markets in Texas where we get nothing. Like, we'll send out and people just don't want to respond. They're very proud of their land or whatever. There's other markets where we'll get a healthier response. But, it has over the last 9 years gotten a little tighter, but it's still, 1 to 2% positive rate, which if you think about, if you send out 1,000 mailers, maybe that costs $500 expenses. If you're not buying $500 properties, it very easily makes up, that's pretty much the only overhead of significance that we carry other than picking up the property itself. I mean, sometimes we'll use realtors. Okay, that's a bit of a commission that comes out of the sale, but they're working for commission. And so you're not outlaying anything. It's just, hey, we have a successful sale. Title companies we use more these days than we have in the past, but even that's a few $100s usually on a piece of vacant land. It's not as much as a house or a structure. And so, yeah, it is about being systematic and methodical and putting processes in place that make sure you're successful. And then it is not speculating or gambling. It's just running a business.
The operator in me loves this because I can tell you're operations people. And I'm nerding out and oh yes, this is so dialed. I can just tell.
Yeah. And it's with any business. I mean, I grew up in operations for big companies, and I ran those operations, and you cannot be successful running a multi-million-dollar supply chain without KPIs and almost daily level dashboards. And you have to know your numbers. This business is not much different. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of play. You can actually be pretty sloppy in the land business and still make money. But if you tighten things up, you can make a lot more money, as with any business.
This has been fantastic. Everything from mindset to technical to a new asset class to just the reality. And Ligia, I get it. I went through some pretty massive setbacks in the last few years too, and it is difficult. It is difficult to just look at that and say, oh, the sun will come out tomorrow. It'll be great. And then actually feel that way. Even though if mentally we know, okay, it doesn't stay like this forever. Like I got
and at
Daniel
the end of
Pink's,
the day, it's just money. I don't want to be like, I don't want to just kind of blow that off, but it is just money. And we are people with a lot of agency, and we can make that money. Like, we're smart, we can think and grow rich. There has never been a better time in the history of humanity to make money with AI and the technologies coming. And it really just requires, some thought and some action. And so, that helps me a lot. It's like, okay, we lost a lot of money. We probably broke even in our multifamily. Some of our early deals were big winners. We had some losers. Okay, we walk away, we learn something, we got great tax benefits, and at the end of the day, it's a push. But we have a lot of runway in front of us to make a lot of money.
That's awesome. You guys, thank you so much for sharing, for being honest about the fact that sometimes you win, sometimes you don't win. I appreciate that. Where can people find you? If they're like, man, I'm going to follow up with these people. This sounds really fascinating. How do people find you?
So our website is flippingdirt.us. And if you go to flippingdirt.us/freedom, I've put together a landing page there where it has different touch points for us. You can find a way to book an appointment. Our email's there. There's some free resources if people want to download a little bit more about land. You can have access to that. So that's probably the best one-stop shop. And then from there, whatever your comfort level is, if you want to have a phone call, if you want to shoot an email, if you want to just passively digest some information, that's the best on-ramp to get to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being part of the Real Estate Pessimist podcast. And now you're part of the family. We look forward to getting this out and sharing this with a much larger audience. As always, thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Pessimist podcast. If you like this episode, if you learned from it, you can send us a note online, send Mike and Ligia a note and say thank you. Reach out to us and share it with a friend. Thanks for joining us.